After e4, e5, knight c3, black can play bishop b4 right away. Now here we don't go on with the usual Vienna Gambit setup, pawn to f4, but simply play knight to d5, attacking the bishop. Now here there's loads of options. The two most popular ones will be bishop a5 and bishop c5. So let's go through bishop a5 first. Now here you attack the bishop immediately with b4, and the only move is bishop to b6. Now white continues with a crucial queen to g4, exploiting the fact that the black dark square bishop left its starting rank and attacking g7, which is a weak pawn right now. So how can the black player continue to protect g7, the infiltration of the queen? Two options are possible: king to f8 or pawn to g6. g6 is met with queen to f3. It's a perfect place to put the queen, and now the position of the white player is already quite superior. Think about it. Black can't just kick away our wonderful knight in d5, because after c6 you can take the bishop, and after, let's say, queen takes back, developing the queen, then white plays a3, protecting the pawn in b4. And just so you understand how many things can go wrong, let's say black can't develop the knight in f6 because it gets taken, and can't even develop the knight in e7 because queen f6 attacks the rook, and when the rook moves to g8, or either way, white is going to play queen takes pawn in e5 with an amazing position. Black can't push d6 to attack the queen, gets taken, there's no way to develop this knight properly. The black king will not be able to castle, white's got the bishop pair, so that's actually just compromise for black. Let's go back a couple of moves. In this position, knight e7 cannot be played. What happens after the normal looking move, d6? White plays bishop to c4, putting pressure on f7, exploiting the fact that g6 happened, meaning that black will never be able to play knight f6 in peace. Now you may argue that earlier black could have taken the knight in b6 with the pawn, leaving the queen in d8, but we're going to look at that in a bit. We're going to look at that type of setup. After bishop c4, the threat of checkmate, queen to c7 is the best move to stop that. White continues with d4. Of course, the opponent king is in the center. We want to swap the central pawns. Our king is in the center too, but our development is much better, and we got the bishop pair, so we don't have to worry. Black's best move is to take the pawn in d4, and white's best is knight to e2, trying to go to d4, which is a fantastic square to go to. If black plays c5, stopping that from happening, simply take. And after pawn takes back, it looks like we've lost the pawn completely, but in reality now we play c3, and we should be able to control the center completely. White is one step away from castling. Position has already been evaluated over +3 or +4 for a few moves already. That tells you a lot about the position. Let's say black continuing development, knight to c6. Looks like this might be a normal game at some point, but look at this weakness. The dark square bishop is missing, because in the variation where they play bishop e5 at the beginning and you play knight d5, you are inevitably going to knight for that bishop, meaning that these squares here, there will be a weakness on the dark squares on the king side. Anyway, knight c6, take the pawn, and after pawn takes back, castle. So remember, black cannot develop the knight anywhere that makes sense, because you're going to exploit the weakness on the dark squares. So let's see what happens after bishop to e6, an attempt of maybe castling alongside. Ignores that swap, because it wouldn't have been good, obviously, because we wouldn't be achieving anything. Bishop to b5, pinning the knight, and after long castle, did the black player manage to go on to a normal game? No, bishop f4 attacks the queen. It's already compromised completely. The queen will have to move, queen to e7, even playing the best moves. See how to exploit this. Rook f to c1, threatening so much. There's so much attack on the c file. And the funny thing is, this bishop cannot be removed from f4, and this king can't move anywhere to proper safety. Bishop to d7, putting extra defense on the knight that we were going to infiltrate in the square c6. White continues with knight to d4. Position evaluated at this point +8, as far as I remember. And yeah, there's going to be too much attack on this knight. We're going to be taking, and then there's probably like a checkmate coming at some point very soon. So from the start, after knight c3, bishop b4, we attack the bishop immediately, and we're looking at bishop a5. Okay, b4, bishop goes away, and now the bishop has abandoned the king side, meaning that we're going to play queen g4, thematic move. And let's go one more time through g6. So we set queen f3 now, and what happens after a normal developing move? Let's say knight c6. Of course, knight f6 was not possible because we're attacking it twice, and we saw what happens after c6. Knight c6, bishop c4, threatening obviously the square f7. So we're threatening something like knight check, and then we have infiltration. Let's see two options here. Obviously, the queen cannot have any access to e7 or f6 because of the knight. So let's see two options. One of them, knight to d4. This loses immediately. Knight to c7, check. So the knight doesn't make it in time to attack our queen because this is check. Queen taking knight. Oh, okay, well, bishop takes knight is not possible. Queen f7 is mate. Queen taking knight is checkmate in 2. Queen takes, and then king moves, and then checkmate. So in this position, after knight takes c7 check, the best move will be king moves, but then still queen check, king d6, knight e8 check. You're gonna win the queen. If black is really stubborn and keeps playing, then queen d5 is mate. In this position, after white just played queen to f3, and black goes on with knight c6, as mentioned, we played bishop c4. What happens after knight to h6, developing a piece, maybe even hoping to castle, and also crucially defending f7. Okay, d3 with the obvious threat of winning the knight for free. Also, after knight to d4, black tries to counterattack with an attack on the queen. It looks like black is going to survive this. But white simply plays queen to f6, attacking the rook, and threatening obviously to take the knight in h6. Obviously, knight to c2 check, winning the rook cannot happen because then we're going to take the opponent rook in h8 with a checkmate. So black will have to prioritize that. The best move by black according to the engine is queen swap, neutralizing the initiative for the moment, but still knight to f6 check. And after king e7, there's an attack on the knight, so we can't take knight in h6, otherwise we're actually losing. So knight to d5 check. And now the best move is king to d8, because we're going to f8 means you can take the knight with check. So now the black player has a threat in c2 and also might think of trying to save his knight in h6. However, white plays bishop to g5 check, and after king to e8, knight f6 check, king to e7, rook to c1 is the best move now, stopping the knight from going to c2. And now we're threatening to play knight to d5 and simply take the knight in h6. There's no move here that helps, because whatever the knight does, if he tries to move away from the attack of the bishop, you could take him with your knight, and that will be a discover check as well. So after d6, best move, knight to d5 check, king to d7, and now we can take the knight. The game is completely over. So from the start, knight c3 and then bishop b4, knight to d5. And after bishop a5, we attack it straight away. Bishop to b6, queen g4. Now let's look at the other move. The best move is king to f8, leaving the pawn structure safe and just moving the king. Now white's best move is a4. The idea is to play a5, winning a piece. So what happens after, let's say d6? There's an attack on our queen by the bishop and the black player is developing. It looks like the most obvious move to play, but still white goes on with queen to g3, and after h5, obviously because the black player will not be able to castle, he lost his right to castle, and he might think of playing h4 and gaining space like that to develop the rook from the g or h file. So now white goes on with a5, attacks the bishop, bishop to d4, only move, c3, and now c6. These are computer moves, best moves by black, trying to resist in a really bad position. So now the knight will have to move. After knight to e3, bishop takes, queen takes back, and now after knight to f6, it looks like the black player did survive the opening, but in reality, position is evaluated already as if white was up a piece. So white plays the only move in the position, which is h3, stopping the knight from going to g4 and become very annoying. And after bishop to e6, developing to the only possible square, knight to f3, the white player has the bishop pair, very advanced pawns on the queen side. He's about to play d3, and after castling, the king will be safe. The position of the black player will always be compromised no matter what. It was good for our knight to be in d5, inducing black to play c6. So here the best move by black is d5. The idea is to crash the central pawns, put double attack over e4, and try a counterattack, especially because our king isn't going to castle immediately. White very quietly plays d3, and obviously if we get taken, we take back, and that's just helping us. After queen to c7, protecting e5, which is being attacked by the knight, knight to g5 attacking the bishop, and black's best now is knight to d7, continuing development, also because taking would just actually making the opponent king not that unsafe, especially after king e7, then black can just connect the rooks and have the f open file. White goes on with bishop e2, time to continue development, and after c5, will the black player be able to smash, dismantle at least our incredible, very advanced pawns on the queen side, castle. Okay, these are just all of these moves that we're going through. Of course, there's not a good chance that all of these moves will happen in a game, but it's important for you to understand how to take the Vienna game and all the concepts behind them. So rather than memorizing moves, try to remember the weaknesses that are being created. Black now, let's look at this move, d4, attacking our queen. Looks like black is about to control a lot of space. Queen to d2 is best move, and after pawn takes in b4, take the pawn in d4. And yeah, we've gone a little bit too far. We've said a lot of things. For example, now we're threatening queen takes b4, completely winning move. So black can't really play rook c8, but either if he plays, let's say, queen to c3, d5 is the best move, attacking the bishop, winning the bishop actually. And it's not a problem for us to give up the rook in a1 because now queen to b4 is deadly. King moving to g8 because of the check, take the bishop, threatening f7, checkmate. Pawn takes back, doesn't help. White goes on with queen e7 now and should be checkmating shortly. One more line in the bishop a5 variation. So knight c3, bishop b4, knight d5 attacking the bishop, bishop a5, you attack it immediately. Bishop b6, queen to g4. So king f8, we said now here we're going to play a4 with a threat on the bishop. What happens after knight to f6? Immediately looking for a swap with this tremendous knight. White plays, and also attacking the queen. White plays queen to h4, pinning the knight, so this is crucially important. c6, now you might wonder, why did c6 not happen before? Well, I was just about to show it. That's why you need to stick around until the end of the video. So here now we take the bishop. Of course, we did all of that, all that maneuver, knight c3, knight d5, and then pawn to b4, forcing the bishop to b6 so that we could take in. And now we're going to go through this scenario where the a pawn takes. This is usually, not always, but usually the best move to take back because the rook will be on an open file. White goes on with f4, transforming this game finally into the, let's say, Vienna Gambit anyway. That's how we like to play it. If you're a Vienna Gambit player, you love the f4 move. Okay, black playing d6 now, take, and now bishop to b2, applying pressure over the pawn in e5. And after knight to d7, protecting the pawn further, protecting the knight as well, developing a piece. White goes on with knight f3, attacking the square more, and we are gonna take it for free. So if black plays queen to e7, defending the pawn a little bit more, white goes on with bishop to d3 in order to finish development and castle as soon as possible. Let's react to this move, c5. How to continue now? Two ways to take back, either with the pawn reuniting the pawn or with the knight developing and allowing maybe the arrival of the bishop and potentially play rook to d8. If black takes with the knight, let's start with this, then simply take the pawn in e5. This is a much better pawn to take, so black shouldn't have done that. Two moves we're going to look at now. Bishop to e6, defending f7 a little bit more and developing the piece. This is met with simply castling, and after knight takes bishop, removing our bishop pair, we capture back. Right now the white player is threatening bishop a3, winning the game, pinning the queen to the king, so even after king to g8, position is still evaluated +6 or something. Now the best move is rook takes, and obviously black will have to take back with the pawn because we're attacking it with the bishop. But still, I mean, we're completely up a piece. If black really does take back, then you go bishop to f6, and a checkmate coming soon, unless black wants to give up the queen. In this position, if black had taken the pawn back with the pawn, just to make example, to see as many setups as possible, white castle, we have a lovely rook and open fire, this king that can never castle anymore. Black plays b6, finding a way to develop the bishop through the fianchetto, and now white plays bishop to b5, knowing that we can never be attacked by any pawn in the square b5, applying pressure on the knight, considering that this knight is the defender of e5. So after bishop to b7 and d3 protecting the pawn, the game is completely over. After rook develops, let's say for example you're going to play a5, infiltrating the rook in the 7th rank no matter what black decides to do about it. And here, even if black had left the rook in a8, still the white's plan is going to be g4, g5, and when the knight moves away, you're going to have a really strong attack on the king. If black prevents that by playing h6, now the whole g4, g5 becomes a bit pointless. White's best move would be queen to g3, finalizing the attack on the pawn in e5. And there's no way to stop that. Let's say knight to h5, attacking the queen, then queen to h3, attacking the knight. The knight will have to move, but we have, let's say, knight to f6, and now knight to h4, preparing knight to h5. Position is evaluated almost +4 at this point. We've got the bishop pair, the knight will be sitting in f5. The king will never really castle, unless you think that, let's say, for example, king to g8, king to g7, I mean h7 with the idea of connecting the rooks, but potentially doing something. Let's say king to g8, knight to f5. King to e7 is not possible because of the attack on the queen. So when the queen moves away, you can tell how terrible the position is. Now we start swapping. Bishop takes knight. Queen takes back is wrong because of bishop e5. We're threatening to simply win the knight for free. If pawn takes back, then you go knight h6 check, winning the queen. We can all see these very basic tactics. The attack on the king side is finalized. And even if black had taken back with the knight going to d7, white goes on with knight to d6, further in the attack on the f7 pawn and also attacking the bishop in b7. Position is evaluated almost +5. So we'll cut this line here and I'll see you in the next video for the bishop c5 variation.